move to motion B and ask Kevin Madill of Aberdeenshire to come forward.
Kevin Madill, delegate number 75, Aberdeenshire. Madam President, delegates, good afternoon. Cocaine, Class A drug, dangerous stimulant, land Eric Clapton song. 3 tonnes of cocaine were seized from a boat in the North Sea 100 miles east of Aberdeen recently. 3 tonnes, slightly less than the weight of paperwork that passes a teacher's desk on an annual basis. 3 tonnes, estimated to be worth more than £500 million. The biggest single Class A seizure in the UK. Good news. Nevertheless, this drug is and will continue to be sold and consumed across the country. Why? Other shipments must be getting through, past customs, across borders, under the radar. How many more tonnes successfully made it through last week? We don't know. It's unquantifiable. To draw comparison with another dangerous, powdery white substance found at sea, sorry about this. Those 3 tonnes are the tip of the iceberg. It's a hackneyed phrase, tip of the iceberg, but a useful one. It's useful too in the context of self-harm. Self-harm is deliberate injury to oneself, typically as a manifestation of mental health and welfare issues. Self-harm. What do you think of when you hear that term? Often, the first thing that springs to mind is a forearm or a wrist covered in lacerations. Obviously, it can take the form of any physical injury anywhere on the body. This leaves a trace, physical evidence of self-harm. As the motion states, there is evidence that rising numbers of pupils are being identified as self-harming. The BBC published an article on the 17th of February this year with the headline, "Self-harm among children in Scotland on the rise." This reports an increase in hospital admissions for self-harm across the last 5 years. It states that last year, 563 under-18s were admitted for self-harm in Scotland. In 2014, more than a third of the 76 admissions to NHS Highlands hospitals involved 15-year-olds. Childline Scotland reported again, February this year, that counselling sessions with 12 to 15-year-olds on self-harm had increased by 20% in the last year. A report by the Edinburgh-based mental health charity, Penumbra, again, a 2014 report, revealed that since 2009 there has been an increase of 166% in the number of referrals it has received. Nigel Henderson, Chief Executive of Penumbra, calls these figures just the tip of the iceberg. But how much self-harm goes undetected? How much, like the iceberg, remains hidden under the surface? We cannot afford to take the mental health and well-being of our pupils for granted simply because there are no outward indicators of self-harm. For me, self-harm is not just about cuts on the arm. It's looking into the mirror, chastising yourself for what you see. It's the abuse of alcohol and drugs as a means to escape. It's the voice in your head telling you you're not good enough. For me, self-harm is all these things and more. Therefore, I ask Congress to consider the motion within such a context. To return to Nigel Henderson of Penumbra, he says problems at school, parental pressure to succeed, or feelings of low self-esteem, alongside changes in local authority services, welfare reform, and local youth unemployment, may all have had an impact on the figures. Yes, I accept that, of course, the causes of self-harm are wide and varied. But equally, we have to accept that school, the curriculum, the at times unrelenting internal assessment of our 15 and 16-year-olds between January and April is a contributing factor to pupil stress and can damage pupil welfare. And as stated by the Scottish Government in a report titled Responding to Self-Harm, published March 2011, key professional groups likely to encounter self-harm in the course of their work include nurses, social workers, and teachers. The evidence shows self-harm is a growing problem in Scottish society. The question is, how do we, as a profession, respond to it? What can we do? The motion refers to pointless and often invalid assessment burdens. Something of which we are all too aware is the frequency and intensity of assessment faced by our 15 and 16-year-olds sitting National 4 and National 5. As a practical example, I've chosen a quotes unquotes average pupil that I've taught this past 2 years. There is no such thing as an average pupil. An awful thing to say, but we've all encountered this pupil in our careers. S4. Diligent, yet her results are unremarkable in the grand scheme. No behavioural issues in the slightest. Quiet, bordering on the timid. Polite, well-natured, no obvious issues outside of school. The type of pupil you have to work hard not to miss in amongst the 29 other bodies in the room. She's sitting 6 subjects in S4. In some schools, people sit 7. 3 subjects at National 4, Modern Studies, 3 assessments and an added value assignment. Biology, 3 unit assessments and an added value assignment. Maths, 3 unit assessments and an added value assignment. 3 subjects at National 5, History, 3 unit assessments, an AV assignment. Music, 3 units encompassing between 4 and 6 assessments altogether, with the performance element taken into account. And my own subject, English, at National 5. 2 units, comprising 4 assessed elements, and as per departmental policy, a National 4 AV assignment thrown in as a fallback. In short, at best, she faced 24 assessments or assignments, the majority of which were crowbarred in between January and April. We didn't used to do this to our 4th years. Every time I mentioned a unit assessment, the AV unit, the folio piece, the prelim, the exam, I could see it. The anxiety written large across her face. I could see it. I could do something, or at least try to do something about it. What didn't I pick up on? What didn't I see this year? What didn't we see this year? Yes, there are relevant assessments, the ones that hone the skills necessary for exams, for progression within the subject, for entering the workplace and the wider world. Others, whether in full or part, are not necessary for the exam, not valuable for progression, not developing skills for work. These are the pointless assessments to which the motion refers. As for the term invalid, an example. SQA, verification of internal assessments in social subjects in 2 Aberdeenshire schools, failed said assessments. Upon appeal, it was pointed out that A, the verifier's reports contained inaccuracies that were often contradictory, and B, that these internal assessments were closely modelled on the unit assessment specification packs issued by the SQA themselves. The decisions to fail the verified assessments were reversed. Furthermore, many of us will have encountered within the model assessments provided by the SQA questions that neither assess nor evidence the outcome that they purport to. Invalid. To conclude, teachers, as we know, have been, by and large, left to develop courses and assessments as we teach them. This overbearing stress that we, as experienced professionals, as adults, are struggling with. The stress is unintentionally, yet undeniably, being transmitted onto our pupils. Therefore, I ask Congress to support this motion, addressing the mental well-being of our pupils and the fight against self-harm depends upon it. Think back to that so-called average pupil. She appears to be coping, just. Think back to that image of the iceberg. She deserves better. They all do. Support the motion. Thank you.
A second seconder for the motion? Thank you. Any contributions to the motion? Sid?
Sid Sanderson, delegate number 9, Aberdeen City. After the last motion, Congress might be getting the impression that it's an Aberdeen City or Aberdeenshire thing, but we think that many of the assessments that the children want to undergo at National 4 and 5 are pointless and invalid. That may very well be correct. But again, as with the last motion, I don't want it to fall on that line, because I would support Kevin's motion. So I would propose or move an amendment to this one as well. And again, Congress, if you to go to your Congress papers, we're at the third line, where the line begins with health, stroke, welfare issues. Congress is concerned that. I would propose that we remove pointless and often invalid, just those words, and then the remainder of the motion will be as it is stated. Again, let me undermine the President anyway. If Congress does support this motion, can we remember after the last one that we wouldn't be debating the motion on whether the assessments are pointless or invalid. It's whether or not they are stressing out our children.
Thank you, Sid. Do a seconder for the motion? Ward McCormick, thank you. Does the proposer accept that amendment?
I will second that.
Ward did, sorry. Kevin, are you happy to accept that amendment? Congress accept the amendment? Right, so the amendment becomes part of the substantive motion, and we'll take further contributions on the motion. Anne?
Anne O'Kane, Delegate 25. Congress, the last part of Kevin's motion calls on the SQA to review its current assessment requirements. As you know, there are 3 methods of assessment: unit, combined and portfolio, which can be used to assess the new qualifications. Would the portfolio method of assessment, that is the gathering of naturally occurring evidence across learning, or put simply, a learner's classwork which meets each individual assessment standard, not fulfil the requirements for most learners, especially for those 15 to 16-year-olds or average pupils to whom Kevin refers?
James?
I had the pleasure of doing National 5 for the first time this year. Right? Most of you will have been doing it for 2 years. This really spoke to me because a lot of our pupils, or a lot of the pupils that I was dealing with this year, and it might have been due to the way that the school managed it, but they couldn't do it anywhere else. You talked about, Kevin, from January. Our pupils at the school that I represented started in November. And along with the end of unit assessments and the assignments they had to do in science and then social subjects, etc., it was almost continuous from November right through until their prelims. But we're the kind of school that we like to do second prelims. Right? So the stress levels that I was seeing could equate to the young girl that you were talking about as well. I had a really nice young girl who was, don't know how she kept it together, but in buckets of tears, right? And when we look at this idea of the assessments and the call of these assessments, I don't think the SQA realised, I think it was all part of the good intentions of broadening out assessments, allowing our children to achieve. But wait a minute, did they actually read the Curriculum for Excellence documents when it talked about children's health and well-being? Because this is completely and utterly run against what that side of Curriculum for Excellence wishes to achieve. So I totally, wholeheartedly would support the motion. Thank you.
James Batch, would you mind indicating who you are and your delegate number?
Sorry, I'm 63, I left it down as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, James. Are there any further contributions to the motion? Okay, so we'll move to a vote. First one of the day. Those in favour, please. And against? Abstentions? Largely carried. Thank you.